Sarah was 7 months pregnant when she and her husband, Mark, disappeared from their Kings Canyon campsite overnight. The nursery was ready, the baby names were chosen, but the family that should have been was gone. The breakthrough came 8 years later when searchers discovered Sarah's bag buried deep in a canyon pit. The exterior was caked with years of mud, but the contents inside remained impossibly pristine, untouched by time or weather. Mark and Sarah Coleman had been planning this trip for months. As expectant parents, they knew their adventuring days as a couple were numbered. Once their baby arrived in February, everything would change. "One last romantic getaway," Mark had said, scrolling through camping websites in their cozy Seattle apartment. "Just you, me, and..." He patted Sarah's growing belly gently. "And little Oliver," Sarah finished, using the name they'd finally settled on after weeks of debate. She was glowing in that way pregnant women do when everything feels perfect and full of possibility. But why did they choose Kings Canyon for their final adventure together? Mark had camped there as a teenager with his father. He remembered the towering sequoia trees, the crystal-clear streams, the sense of being completely removed from the outside world. It seemed like the perfect place to reconnect before their lives changed forever. Sarah wasn't much of a camper, but she trusted Mark completely. He'd promised her comfortable sleeping arrangements, easy hiking trails, and plenty of opportunities to rest. At 7 months pregnant, she tired easily, but the idea of one final adventure with her husband excited her. They left Seattle on a Friday morning in October 2015, Sarah's handbag packed with everything she might need for the weekend. Prenatal vitamins, maternity clothes, the latest ultrasound photos showing Oliver's perfect little profile. She'd even brought along the pregnancy journal her sister had given her, planning to write about their last pre-baby adventure. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Mark asked as they loaded their SUV, noticing how Sarah had to pause to catch her breath. "I'm pregnant, not broken," she laughed. "Besides, Oliver needs to experience the wilderness before he's born. It'll be good for him." They drove south through California's Central Valley, Sarah's hand resting on her belly as she felt Oliver kick and move inside her. He was active lately, as if sensing the excitement of the upcoming trip. "He's going to be a little adventurer," Mark said, reaching over to feel the baby's movements. "Just like his parents. But some adventures lead to places you never expected to go, don't they?" They arrived at Kings Canyon National Park in the early afternoon. The ranger at the entrance station was friendly, recommending several easy trails suitable for expectant mothers. Mark had reserved Campsite 47 in the Grant Grove area, close to restrooms and drinking water, perfect for Sarah's needs. The campsite was beautiful, nestled among massive sequoia trees that had been standing for thousands of years. Sarah stood in their shadow, one hand on her back, the other cradling her belly. "It's incredible," she whispered. "Oliver, can you feel how big these trees are?" Mark set up their tent while Sarah arranged their supplies. She was meticulous about organization, especially now that pregnancy brain made her forget things more easily. Everything had its place. Her medications in a small blue pouch, snacks in easy-to-reach containers, extra clothes in case of temperature changes. Her handbag sat on the picnic table, filled with all the small treasures of expectant motherhood. The ultrasound photos she carried everywhere, showing them to anyone who asked about the baby. Love letters Mark had written to her during the pregnancy, each one more tender than the last. a tiny pair of baby socks she'd bought on impulse, still in their package, waiting for Oliver's arrival. That evening, they cooked dinner over their camp stove and talked about their future. Mark had been promoted to senior architect at his firm. Sarah planned to take 6 months off from her teaching job to bond with the baby. They had it all figured out. "What do you think he'll be like?" Sarah asked, absently rubbing her belly as Oliver performed his nightly acrobatics routine. "Curious," Mark said immediately. "Look how active he is. He's already exploring his world." "I hope he gets your sense of adventure and my common sense," Sarah laughed. "Deal. Though I'm not sure camping at 7 months pregnant demonstrates much common sense." Sarah threw a pine cone at him playfully. "This was your idea, remember?" They went to bed early, exhausted from the drive and the excitement of being in such a magnificent place. Sarah had to get up twice during the night to use the restroom, one of the less glamorous aspects of late pregnancy, but otherwise slept soundly. Mark lay awake longer, listening to his wife's gentle breathing and feeling Oliver's occasional movements against Sarah's side where his arm rested. In a few months, they'd be parents. Real parents, responsible for this tiny person they'd created together. The forest was quiet around them, filled with the ancient presence of trees that had witnessed countless human stories. Some stories ended happily, some ended in mystery. Mark finally drifted off around midnight, completely unaware that he and Sarah would never see another sunrise together. In the deeper parts of the canyon, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting in these ancient woods for exactly this kind of moment, this kind of love, this kind of perfect, vulnerable happiness. It moved silently through the shadows between the massive trees, drawn by the warmth of human connection, by the pure joy of two people creating new life together. Some entities feed on fear, others prefer love. And what could be more powerful than the love between expectant parents and their unborn child? As Mark and Sarah slept peacefully in their tent, protected by nothing more than nylon walls and their faith in each other, the thing in the woods grew closer. It had been alone for so long. It had been hungry for so long. And now it had found exactly what it needed. Sarah's handbag sat on the picnic table, filled with all the tokens of their coming parenthood. The ultrasound photos that proved Oliver was healthy and growing. The love letters that documented Mark's excitement about becoming a father. The baby clothes that waited for tiny hands and feet. By morning, these would be the only traces left of a family that should have been. But the bag would remember everything. Every hope, every dream, every tender moment between two people who loved each other enough to create new life. And 8 years later, when someone finally found it buried in mud at the bottom of an impossible pit, those memories would still be perfectly preserved, untouched by time, weather, or the mysterious force that had claimed Mark, Sarah, and little Oliver on that quiet October night. Some love is too powerful to destroy completely. Some bonds transcend even the darkest mysteries. But first, the mystery had to begin. Saturday morning came with an unsettling silence. Park Ranger Jennifer Martinez made her routine patrol at 7:30 a.m., checking on campers who might need assistance or information about trail conditions. October weekends brought many visitors to Kings Canyon, and expectant parents like the Colemans often needed extra support during their stay. But when she approached Campsite 47, something felt wrong. No morning coffee brewing, No sounds of a couple preparing for their day. No gentle conversation between husband and wife discussing their plans for exploring the ancient sequoia groves. "Mr. and Mrs. Coleman?" Martinez called out. "Everything okay this morning?" Silence answered her. The tent was zipped shut, exactly as it should be. Their SUV sat in the parking space, keys visible on the dashboard. Sarah's handbag remained on the picnic table where she'd left it, surrounded by neatly organized camping supplies. But where were Mark and Sarah? Martinez approached the tent cautiously. As a ranger, she'd seen plenty of camping mishaps. People who wandered off trail, got lost, or had medical emergencies in the wilderness. But something about this scene felt different. She called out again, louder this time. "Mr. Coleman? Mrs. Coleman? Are you in there?" Still nothing. Martinez unzipped the tent flap and peered inside. What she saw made no sense. 2 sleeping bags lay perfectly flat, still slightly warm to the touch. Mark's wallet sat beside his pillow, exactly where a careful person might place it for safekeeping. Sarah's maternity clothes were folded neatly in the corner, along with her prenatal vitamins and a book about preparing for childbirth. But Mark and Sarah had vanished. "This doesn't add up," Martinez muttered, stepping back from the tent. 7 months pregnant women don't just disappear in the middle of the night. Responsible husbands don't abandon their sleeping wives to wander off alone. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The Colemans were gone. Martinez radioed park headquarters immediately. "We have a situation at campsite 47. Missing persons, a husband and pregnant wife. No signs of struggle, no indication of where they went." Within an hour, Ranger Captain Dale Roberts arrived with a full search team. Roberts had 30 years of wilderness experience. He'd handled everything from lost hikers to bear encounters to medical emergencies in remote locations. But he'd never seen a case quite like this. The campsite told a story that made no logical sense. Everything was perfectly organized, as if Mark and Sarah had simply evaporated from their sleeping bags. Their hiking boots sat side by side outside the tent entrance, still damp from the previous evening's dew. The camp stove was set up for breakfast, with coffee grounds and pancake mix ready to go. "Any chance they went for an early morning walk?" asked Ranger Thompson, the newest member of the team. Roberts shook his head. "Not without their shoes. Not with a 7 months pregnant woman. Look at this." He gestured to Sarah's handbag on the picnic table. Inside were all the precious items an expectant mother would never leave behind. Ultrasound photos of baby Oliver, showing his perfect little features. Love letters from Mark, filled with excitement about becoming a father. A tiny pair of baby socks still in their original packaging. "She wouldn't abandon these," Robert said firmly. "These are treasures to her." But if Mark and Sarah hadn't left voluntarily, what had happened to them? The search began immediately. 12 trained searchers divided into 4 groups, each taking a different direction from campsite 47. The plan was systematic. Cover a mile radius, look for any sign of passage, any clue about where the Colemans might have gone. What they found was more puzzling than helpful. The first team discovered fresh disturbances in the forest about 300 yards north of the campsite. Not footprints exactly, but patterns in the fallen leaves and pine needles that suggested something large had moved through the area recently. "Could be elk," the team leader radioed back. "But the patterns are strange, almost like something was dragged." The second team found unusual markings on several sequoia trees. Deep scratches in the bark, too high for any local wildlife to make, too precise to be random damage. The scratches formed geometric patterns, like symbols from an unknown language. "These look fresh," reported Ranger Johnson. "Made within the last 24 hours. But I've never seen markings like this before." The third team made the most disturbing discovery of all. They found one of Sarah's maternity shirts. It was hanging from a branch 15 feet up an ancient sequoia, positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there. The shirt was clean, undamaged, but completely out of reach for a pregnant woman or even her athletic husband. "How did it get up there?" whispered the searcher who spotted it. "There's no way Sarah could climb that high in her condition, and Mark couldn't have reached that branch without professional equipment." The fourth team found Mark's watch. It sat on a fallen log 2 miles from their campsite, the band neatly arranged as if someone had deliberately removed it and placed it there. The watch was still running, keeping perfect time, but one detail made everyone's blood run cold. The date function showed October 15th, the correct date, but somehow the time was running backwards. "That's impossible," muttered the searcher, examining it. "Digital watches don't run in reverse." But impossible things were becoming commonplace in this search. The dogs arrived by midday. German shepherds trained specifically for finding missing persons, capable of following scent trails days old. They picked up Mark and Sarah's scent immediately at the campsite, but lost it completely after 50 yards. Not faded, not weakened, lost. As if the couple had simply ceased to exist at that point in the forest. "I don't understand this," the dog handler told Roberts. "These animals can track scent through rain, snow, even after forest fires. But here, nothing. It's like your missing people just stopped being people." Helicopter searches began in the afternoon. Thermal imaging equipment scanned the vast wilderness areas surrounding Kings Canyon, looking for any heat signatures that might indicate 2 people hiding or injured in the forest. They found nothing. By evening, the search had expanded to cover 40 square miles of dense wilderness. News crews arrived, broadcasting the story of the pregnant woman and her husband who had vanished from their campsite without explanation. Sarah's sister drove down from Sacramento, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to reporters. "Sarah was so careful about everything," she said. "The pregnancy, the trip, every detail planned perfectly. She would never put herself or the baby in danger by wandering off alone." But Sarah was in danger now. Somewhere in the vast wilderness of Kings Canyon, a 7 months pregnant woman and her husband were missing. Possibly injured, possibly worse. The search teams found more strange evidence as the hours passed. More geometric symbols carved into trees. More impossible placements of personal items. Sarah's prenatal vitamins discovered inside a hollow log that showed no signs of human access. Mark's camping knife balanced on a rock formation 30 feet above ground. Each clue raised more questions than it answered. Each discovery made the mystery deeper instead of clearer. On Sunday evening, the official search was suspended. The Park Service issued careful statements about how wilderness areas can be unpredictable, how even experienced campers sometimes encounter situations beyond their control. But the rangers who had walked those forests for 2 days knew this case was different. This wasn't about people getting lost or having accidents. This was about something else entirely, something that didn't follow normal rules. Captain Roberts couldn't let it go. He'd seen Sarah's handbag on that picnic table, filled with all the tender preparations of approaching motherhood. He'd imagined her excitement about showing off ultrasound photos, her husband's pride in their growing family. Now those precious items sat as evidence in a case file that would remain unsolved for years to come. But somewhere in the vast wilderness of Kings Canyon, Sarah's handbag was about to begin a journey that would defy every law of physics and preservation known to science. A journey that would end 8 years later in a muddy pit, with contents that time itself had refused to touch. 8 years passed. The Coleman case became a cold file buried in Park Service archives. Sarah's sister moved to Oregon, unable to bear the constant reminders of loss. The media moved on to other stories. Life continued, but some mysteries refused to stay buried. Dr. Amanda Chen was a geologist studying erosion patterns in Kings Canyon's deeper wilderness areas. October 2023 had brought unusually heavy rains to California, creating perfect conditions for her research into how water carved new channels through the ancient landscape. She had no idea she was about to stumble upon evidence that would reopen one of the park's most baffling missing persons cases. Perfect conditions for canyon formation, she muttered to herself, checking GPS coordinates as she hiked deeper into areas rarely visited by tourists. The recent storms had washed away years of accumulated debris, exposing rock formations that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Amanda's specialty was understanding how flash floods created the deep pits and hidden caverns that dotted Kings Canyon's landscape. Her research could help park services better protect visitors from sudden weather changes. But today, she was about to discover something that had nothing to do with natural geology. The pit appeared suddenly, hidden by overgrown vegetation until Amanda was almost on top of it. Recent rains had washed away the covering of branches and leaves that had concealed it for years. "Interesting," Amanda said, peering down into the 15-foot deep hole. "This formation doesn't match the surrounding geology." She secured her climbing rope and rappelled into the pit, expecting to find typical sediment layers and maybe some interesting mineral deposits. Instead, she found something that made no scientific sense. At the bottom of the pit, partially buried in mud and debris, was a woman's handbag. "That's odd," Amanda whispered, using her brush to carefully uncover the item. The leather exterior was caked with years of accumulated mud, stained dark brown from constant moisture. The bag looked like it had been buried in this pit for a very long time. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was what happened when Amanda opened the bag. Inside, protected by the leather exterior, were items that looked like they'd been placed there yesterday. A wallet with credit cards arranged in perfect order. Maternity clothes folded as neatly as if they'd just come from the store. A small blue pouch containing prenatal vitamins that showed no signs of moisture damage. "This is impossible," Amanda breathed, pulling out item after item in pristine condition. She found love letters written on stationery that should have deteriorated years ago in the damp conditions. The ink was still vibrant, the paper still crisp. She could read every word of romantic messages between a husband and his pregnant wife, discussing their excitement about becoming parents. But the most impossible discovery was a collection of ultrasound photos. The thermal paper should have degraded within months in this environment. Instead, the images were crystal clear, showing a baby in perfect detail. Someone had written on the back in careful handwriting, "Oliver at 28 weeks, October 10th, 2015. October 2015. 8 years ago." Amanda's hands trembled as she examined the evidence. No organic materials could survive 8 years in these conditions and remain this well preserved. The constant moisture, temperature fluctuations, and soil acidity should have destroyed everything long ago. Yet here were items that looked brand new. Amanda documented everything with her camera, following strict archaeological protocols despite the surreal nature of her discovery. She photographed the bag's position in the pit, the pristine condition of the contents, the impossible preservation of items that should have been destroyed by time and weather. As she worked, Amanda noticed something else that didn't make sense. The mud caking the exterior of the bag contained mineral deposits that suggested it had been buried for years. But underneath that mud, the leather showed no signs of degradation, no cracking, no deterioration, no damage from insects or small animals. It was as if the bag had been protected by some invisible force that kept time itself from affecting its contents. Amanda found more treasures inside. A tiny pair of baby socks, still in their original packaging, a pregnancy journal with entries dated right up until October 14th, 2015. The final entry read, "Mark and I are so excited for our camping trip tomorrow. One last adventure before Oliver arrives." The next page was blank. Their adventure had ended before Sarah could write another word. Amanda climbed out of the pit with her discovery, her mind racing with questions that had no scientific answers. She'd found evidence from a missing persons case, but evidence that challenged everything she understood about preservation and decay. She drove straight to park headquarters, still wearing her muddy field clothes, demanding to speak with whoever handled cold cases from 2015. Ranger Captain Roberts, now nearing retirement, listened to Amanda's story with growing amazement. When she showed him the photographs of the pristine contents, he had to sit down. "That's definitely Sarah Coleman's handbag," he confirmed, studying the images on Amanda's camera. "I remember it perfectly. She had it on the picnic table that last morning, filled with all her pregnancy mementos." "But how is everything so well preserved?" Amanda asked. "These items should have been destroyed years ago." Roberts had been asking himself similar questions for 8 years. The Coleman case had haunted him throughout his career, filled with impossible evidence and unanswerable questions. "We found their personal items in strange places during the original search," he told Amanda. "Always perfectly preserved, always positioned in locations that made no sense. Sarah's maternity shirt hanging 15 feet up a tree, Mark's watch running backwards." Running backwards? We never could explain it, just like we can't explain this. Robert studied the ultrasound photos Amanda had found. Sarah carried these everywhere. She was so proud of that baby, so excited about becoming a mother. She'd show them to anyone who asked. Amanda looked at the images of little Oliver, forever frozen at 28 weeks of development. His parents vanished before he could be born. What do you think happened to them? Roberts had theories, but none of them made sense to rational minds. Something took them, something that doesn't follow natural laws, and somehow Sarah's bag ended up in that pit, preserved by forces we don't understand. That evening, Amanda returned to the pit with additional equipment. She wanted to study the geology more carefully, to understand how such perfect preservation was possible in these conditions. What she found challenged her scientific training even further. The soil layers around the bag showed signs of disturbance that didn't match any natural geological process. It was as if the pit had been excavated, the bag placed carefully at the bottom, then filled in again by something with perfect knowledge of how to create the illusion of natural burial. But no human could have done this work. The precision required, the understanding of soil composition and drainage patterns, was beyond anything in Amanda's experience. Something else had buried Sarah's handbag in this pit, something that wanted it preserved exactly as it was, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. And now, 8 years later, that moment had arrived. That night, Amanda Chen couldn't sleep. The pristine contents of Sarah's handbag defied everything she knew about geology, chemistry, and the natural world. She returned to her laboratory at UC Davis, determined to find a scientific explanation for what she'd discovered. But some mysteries don't have scientific solutions. Amanda ran every test she could think of. Soil analysis to determine how long the items had been buried. Chemical testing to understand the preservation process. Microscopic examination of the paper fibers in Sarah's love letters. The results made no sense. The soil samples indicate the bag has been buried for approximately 8 years, she told her research partner, Dr. James Liu. But the organic materials show no signs of decomposition whatsoever. James examined the ultrasound photos under high magnification. The thermal paper should have degraded completely within 6 months in those conditions. Instead, it looks like it was printed yesterday. That's not the strangest part, Amanda said, pulling out Sarah's pregnancy journal. Look at this. She opened to the final entry, dated October 14, 2015. The ink was still vibrant, the paper crisp and clean, but as James watched, something impossible happened. New words began to appear on the blank page below Sarah's final entry, faint at first, like invisible ink becoming visible, then clearer and more defined, written in Sarah's careful handwriting. Something's wrong. Mark thinks we should leave, but I can't move. The baby, Oliver, is so quiet. James stepped back from the journal. That's impossible. You can't have delayed chemical reactions that take 8 years to manifest. But the writing continued to appear. I can hear them calling us. Beautiful voices, like angels singing lullabies. Mark is scared, but I'm not. Oliver seems peaceful now. Amanda's hands trembled as more text materialized. We're going somewhere safe, somewhere time doesn't hurt. Tell my sister I love her. Tell her Oliver would have been perfect. Then, in different handwriting, Mark's handwriting, a final message. We're together. We're all together. Don't look for us. The writing stopped. The page remained blank below those final words. How is this possible? James whispered. Amanda had no answer. She'd witnessed something that challenged the fundamental laws of reality, something that suggested Sarah and Mark Coleman were somehow still conscious, still able to communicate across 8 years of separation from the physical world. But where were they? That evening, Amanda returned to Kings Canyon with specialized equipment. If Sarah and Mark were somehow still alive, still able to write in their journal, maybe they could communicate in other ways. She set up electromagnetic field detectors around the pit where she'd found the handbag, EMF readers that could detect unusual energy patterns, digital recorders sensitive enough to pick up the faintest sounds. As darkness fell over the canyon, Amanda's equipment began to react. The EMF readings spiked dramatically, indicating the presence of energy sources that shouldn't exist in this remote location. The digital recorders picked up sounds that made Amanda's blood run cold. Voices, faint but unmistakable. A man and woman talking softly, as if having an intimate conversation in another room. Mark's voice. She found our messages, Sarah. Someone finally understands. Sarah's voice. Tired but peaceful. Is Oliver safe here? Can he grow up here? Mark. Time doesn't work the same way. He's still with us, still growing, just differently. Amanda listened in amazement as the conversation continued. Mark and Sarah Coleman, missing for 8 years, discussing their unborn child as if they were still together somewhere beyond the physical world. Hello? Amanda called out into the darkness. Mark? Sarah? Can you hear me? The voices stopped. Silence filled the canyon. Then, Sarah's voice, closer than before. Tell them we're okay. Tell them Oliver is safe. Where are you? Amanda asked. Mark's voice. Somewhere between. Somewhere love doesn't die. Can you come back? Long silence. Then Sarah sadly. We can't return. But Oliver. Maybe Oliver can be born into your world instead of ours. Amanda didn't understand what that meant. But as she packed her equipment to leave, she noticed something that made her question everything she thought she knew about life and death. In the mud at the bottom of the pit, a new impression had appeared. Small, perfect, like the footprint of a newborn baby. Oliver's footprint. 8 years after his parents disappeared, somehow still growing, still developing in a place where time followed different rules. Some families transcend death itself. Some love creates its own reality. And sometimes, the impossible becomes the only explanation that makes sense. Amanda Chen spent 3 more nights at Kings Canyon, trying to understand what she'd experienced. Each evening brought new evidence that challenged her scientific worldview. More writing appeared in Sarah's pregnancy journal, messages of love and hope from parents who existed somewhere beyond normal reality, updates about Oliver's development in a place where time followed different rules. But the most extraordinary discovery came on Amanda's final night. She was packing her equipment when she heard crying. Not the voices she'd grown accustomed to, but the unmistakable sound of a newborn baby. The crying came from the pit where she'd found Sarah's handbag. Amanda rappelled down with her flashlight, following the sound to its source. At the bottom, where Oliver's tiny footprint had appeared, she found something that defied every law of nature she'd ever studied. A blanket, small, soft, and perfectly clean, despite the muddy conditions. Wrapped inside was a note written in Sarah's handwriting. "Oliver is ready to be born. Can you help him find his way to your world?" Amanda looked around the empty pit, hearing the baby's cries growing stronger. But there was no baby, no physical presence, just the sound of new life trying to break through from another dimension. "How?" Amanda whispered to the darkness, Sarah's voice clear as if she were standing right beside her. "Love creates its own miracles. Oliver wants to live. He wants to experience the world Mark and I can't return to." Over the following weeks, Amanda struggled with what she'd witnessed. As a scientist, she should report her findings, but who would believe her? Who would understand that she'd discovered a family existing between dimensions, held together by bonds too strong for death to break? She made her decision. Instead of publishing papers or giving interviews, Amanda quietly contacted Sarah's sister in Oregon. "I found something that belonged to Sarah," she said simply, "something that suggests she and Mark are at peace." When Amanda showed Lisa the pristine contents of Sarah's handbag, the woman broke down crying. "These are exactly how Sarah left them. She was so excited about Oliver, so proud of those ultrasound photos." "There's something else," Amanda said gently, handing Lisa the pregnancy journal with its impossible new entries. Lisa read Sarah's messages through tears, words of love, assurances that she and Mark were together, promises that Oliver was safe and growing in a place where families never had to say goodbye. "Is this really from her?" Lisa whispered. Amanda nodded. "I believe it is, and I think she wants Oliver to have a chance at life in our world." 3 months later, Lisa called Amanda with news that defied explanation. She was pregnant. After years of trying unsuccessfully to have children, she was finally expecting a baby. "The timing is impossible," Lisa said, "but somehow I know this is Sarah's gift to our family, a way for Oliver to be born, even if his parents can't be here to raise him." Amanda visited Lisa throughout her pregnancy, documenting the miraculous development of a child who shouldn't have been possible. When baby Oliver was born, healthy, perfect, with Sarah's eyes and Mark's smile, Amanda knew she'd witnessed something beyond science. The Coleman case officially remains unsolved. Park records show that Mark and Sarah disappeared from their campsite on October 15, 2015, leaving no trace. Their bodies were never found. The mystery was never explained. But Sarah's handbag now sits in Lisa's home, its contents preserved as proof that love transcends physical death. The ultrasound photos show the original Oliver at 28 weeks, the one who exists between dimensions, growing up with parents who refused to let death separate their family. Meanwhile, the Oliver who lives in our world grows strong and curious, carrying within him the love of parents he'll never meet, but who watch over him from somewhere beyond time and space. Kings Canyon still draws families seeking adventure in its ancient wilderness. Most return safely with memories of magnificent sequoia trees and crystal-clear streams. But sometimes, on quiet October evenings when mist rises from the valleys, visitors report hearing sounds that don't belong in the natural world. The gentle conversation of a loving couple, the soft cries of a baby, learning to exist in 2 dimensions at once. And deep in the canyon, in a pit that official records claim doesn't exist, tiny footprints footprints continue to appear in the mud, growing larger each year, as if someone is learning to walk in a world where the impossible happens every day. Some mysteries are too beautiful to solve completely. Some families find ways to stay together that transcend our understanding of life and death. The Coleman family is still out there, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the love that refuses to let go. And baby Oliver grows up knowing he is cherished by parents in two worlds.